Welcome to this episode of Inspirational People. I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and today I get to introduce you to my friend, Todd Miechiels. Todd, say hello.
Oh, word.
Todd is the founder and vision bearer of the 315 Project. He helps people know and share their story wholeheartedly. Todd and I originally met through a mutual friend during a Catalyst conference almost a decade ago, and one that was monumental for me in my own journey. We stayed connected over the years, and the 315 Project became one of my first freelancing clients, and we stayed connected since then, and that was in 2014. As the world has changed and we face the crisis we're now in, I witnessed many people sort of lead, stand up, stand in, and fill the gap. You're one of those people that I've watched doing your daily LinkedIn videos and sharing some inspirational words of wisdom, music, and other creative insights. So, Todd, tell me about you, your story, how we got here, and what you're doing on LinkedIn.
Well, thanks. Let's see. I was in the business world doing internet marketing,
Yeah.
and at about age 40, which was now about almost 15 years ago, 16 years ago, I got called to just help people tell their stories after myself being challenged at North Point Church to get baptized. And I didn't think I had a story, and they make you film it on
Yeah.
video and share it. And I don't know, just it was something undeniable. Just this little flux capacitor moment where
Game
gosh,
changer.
everybody, yeah,
Yeah.
everybody has a story, and I think we ought to be helping them at least have
Yeah.
the opportunity to tell it.
Yeah.
So I started doing that about 10 years ago. Started the 315 Project, and really just been trying to be obedient more than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, how does that put you on LinkedIn doing these daily videos? What is that, and why are you doing that, and what inspired you to do that? I mean, you could have just crawled into your hole and closed off the world, but you kind of decided to lean in.
Well, it's ironic you say that because I kind of did crawl into a hole, to be honest with you. And I knew that wasn't healthy. And I was it was almost from a point of, God, what can I do? Because I feel like there's so much I can't do,
Yes.
which I knew was the enemy. But what can
Mhm.
I do? And he reminded me when I gave my life to Christ about 15, 20, almost 20 years ago now, I made a prayer. I said, God, I haven't used any of my musical talents in like 10, 12 years. I hadn't touched an instrument. And I'm like, if you could provide some ways for me to share those gifts and glorify you, like that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
So kind of like answered prayer.
Yeah.
I just started, it wasn't really like out of complete selflessness. It was pretty selfish. God, I want to feel closer to you. I don't feel like worshiping. I don't feel like
Yeah.
singing your praises. I don't feel like being known
Yeah.
right now, but I just there's something in me that knew it would be cathartic for me. It would stretch me out of my comfort zone, and it would hopefully in some ways share and reflect his love
Yeah.
for others.
So for those that haven't actually seen them, what is it? What are these videos you're doing?
I just fire up the camera, wake up in the morning. It's like, all right, it's early in the morning. My voice is very low and very gravelly, and it's not going to sound very good at all. But even despite that, how can I just make what I have available in the morning to worship God and adore Him? So I
Yeah.
just started picking songs that I felt that were going to touch my heart, and then it was really almost like letting people in to my worship time, not
To
as
share it with others, essentially. Yeah.
let them partake and fellowship.
Yeah. So it seems, a year ago, 2 years ago, someone might have said, "You're doing worship sessions on LinkedIn every day." Like that sounds bizarre. Like, what's happening here? So how is that being responded to on this business platform?
It's been really, really good for me to see how rarely, if ever, these videos are shared,
Mm-hmm.
how rarely, if ever, they're liked or commented on. But out of left field, anecdotally, just people messaging me, emailing me, texting me how much it's meaning to them. And it's such a good reminder of we have to be willing to decrease so he can increase. And if we're tempted to start thinking about the quantitative virality of these things, we're probably doing it for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
So it's been humbling
Yeah.
to see how little they've been shared, but it's also been a loving reminder from our Heavenly Father, like you're not doing them so that they're shared.
Yeah.
You're doing
It's auditing your own heart. Yeah.
Don't you
And just
always?
going through that, like you said, obedience, it's the thing you're doing, and you're doing it for that drive, not because of, what it does or where it goes.
Well, and the interesting tension for me is like, as you know, I always have no shortage of ideas or projects that I'm trying to execute. And I'm like, why am I spending 2.5, hours practicing and recording and editing these songs when there's so many other things that I could be doing? And I just kind of felt this, heavenly hug, like, maybe this is exactly just what I want you to be doing. So,
yeah. Do you find that it energizes you? That it for the day? Or does it drain you or something else?
it doesn't drain me. It doesn't drain me. It definitely, I don't know about re-energizing. It sustains me. How about that? I think that's a good word.
It's like your daily bread in a way.
Yeah, I feel like it's my way of, if I'm the sheep, it's my way of kind of sitting with the shepherd in that time.
Just to be. So on that note, I mean, we're kind of in this situation where, we're in the storm, we're in that boat, and the waves are crashing, and like you mentioned earlier, it can be overwhelming because of just what we can see and what's out there and what's happening and the needs. And it's like, what do I do? What can I do? So how can we be looking at this in a wise way or in a helpful way without it crushing us in the same time?
Well, the thing that I've been asking God to show me, because in truthfulness, like, I don't know hardly anybody that's been affected. I don't know anyone that's been affected from the health standpoint. I know several friends that have lost their jobs, but to me, it's almost, God, it shouldn't take this virus for us to know that there's so many hurting people that are going through valleys of all kinds. It's not like it's new in April that people
that crisis that came around.
Yeah, so I think, probably cliche to say, but just, getting outside ourselves and resisting that temptation to be self-centered, self-pity, self-preference, self-comfort, improvement even.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things I've seen on LinkedIn about, like, hey, now is the time for you to get better in this area, or you to start this, or you to start that. And, we're very selfish. I'm a very selfish person, and this has been good for me to have the blinders taken off my world and say, okay, there's a bigger world going on around me.
So is there something to, I guess what I'm hearing is the challenges that we're all facing, they are not new, but there's something about this crisis that gets us to sort of drop our guard and actually see that thing that was actually already there to begin with?
Well, for me, it was a sudden disruption in our daily habits of analog and digital, and meetings and, to-do lists. In a lot of ways, for most of the folks that I know, like, we were forced to slow down. We were forced to, in some ways, stop. It was almost like the Matrix, like, where it's like, for one moment, everything slowed down. We're like, wow, there's people in my life that are hurting. And scared. And so it like, I think, like, when we get sick, if you think of the last time you had a bad cold or a flu, it's like you're knocked out. You're forced to just sit there. And I think we all kind of got that at the same time, which is, certainly in my lifetime, historic. I don't know in any other time where we've all been like, okay, we all have the opportunity to reassess and take note and be aware of things that, if we're being honest, we're far too busy and
Yeah.
selfish to take
Well,
care of
and
yourself.
I wonder, if, I do like agree with you. And, I've gone through, a few years ago, that the Sabbath year that we did. And this feels very similar in the sense that it's like this pause button on, we are trying to go a million miles an hour and go so far, so fast, and more and more and more. And now it's like, even if you want that, you can't, except for maybe a few exceptions. But it's an interesting dynamic to kind of be forced to be still, which is the thing we probably needed. We just weren't willing to do it on our own accord.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how can we channel that into kind of what you're describing? So into this new normal, and how we live and how we work. How do we make this a permanent fixture in the way that we live?
Well, I can speak personally. I'm realizing how much I need to be checked in on, how much I need to know that someone's wondering how I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it convicts me that I'm surrounded by people that are also feeling that way, if they're being honest. Everyone's like, oh, I'm doing fine. Yeah, things are good. Even if they're not, even if they haven't lost a job, even if they haven't had
Yeah.
a health scare, this is an opportunity for us to connect and unify through our brokenness and our woundedness. But it takes courage, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest, like, there's been times when I've had people dial me and I look at the phone, it's like, I don't want to talk to anybody right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's a humbling and embarrassing thing to admit that, because sometimes I may not want to talk to them just because I like, hey, I'm doing something that is bringing me pleasure, watching TV or,
Yeah.
doing something. But sometimes, like, I don't want to take my mask off and be real right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think we have an opportunity. I mean, at any day I can wake up and I say, God, who in my life would you like me to call and check in on?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of how I feel, regardless of how I think they'll respond to it, regardless of whether they'll appreciate it or not. And just, be obedient, do that, pray, see what names he puts on your heart, be obedient to it. I do that quite a bit, and I've never once regretted it.
Yeah, it's like it's a hard thing to like anticipate or start, but once you do it, it's I guess it's kind of like past you is doing things that future you will like.
Yeah. The other thing, a buddy was asking on LinkedIn, hey, what could we do during this time to be an encouragement to our employees? And what I thought was, send a pre-recorded, heartfelt video message to someone, like a place of gratitude or encouragement. I said, if we're being honest, when you call and interrupt people in a live context, they may feel like they have to put a mask on, right? Which doesn't allow them to have any healing whatsoever. But if you can send them a pre-recorded video message, they're like, hey, you may not want to talk to me or anybody right now. I get that, but I just want you to know, blank, right? They can watch that when they want to, in the anonymity of.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
So I guess on that note, how do we help others to embrace these ideas that you're talking about? How do we help teach, inspire, guide others? I mean, it's one thing to do it for ourselves, but to step in the gap, and do it, help others do the same thing. What are your thoughts there?
Well, after trying to help thousands of people tell their stories, that for the most part, we're all lizard brain, like humans. People aren't going to do anything unless they realize what's in it for them, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So, what would be a motive or an underlying motive for someone want to be an encouragement to someone?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's kind of tapping into their woundedness right now, like their fear, their selfishness, their anger. It's like, if you have a way to disrupt that and diffuse it by doing the anecdote to it, So
Okay.
if you're feeling selfish, right, like do something selfish and selfless and be grateful.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I guess that's a long-winded way. It almost seems like there's some like neuro-linguistic programming something that I hear. Someone has to be in so much pain that the pain that they're in is great enough that they're willing to do
Yeah.
something out of their comfort zone to be an encouragement to someone else.
Yeah. I kind of think of a visual. Your house is on fire, and it has to be on fire before you leave the house. But there's also another aspect where there's a house across the street that's appealing enough that you want to go to that house instead of yours. So the pain and the lure, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's how God has to move us out of the house.
Yeah. And, I think there's an opportunity for all of us to be asking, how is my relationship with God right now? Am I embracing him? Do I feel embraced? Do I feel loved? Or do I feel distant or unconnected?
Mm.
Because we can't give what we don't have. So
Mm-hmm.
I can't pour in and encourage others with the love of Christ if I'm not receiving it. And it's so easy to cut that reception off.
Yeah.
Just turn the channel, right? Like, I'm not
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think of like an electric car. I mean, you can plug it in and get a charge, and you can go for maybe a couple hundred miles, but eventually the battery's going to die.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good metaphor for this weird phrase, like Reggie Campbell, like how full is your love tank? He always used to ask that. So I think that's a good encouragement for any of the listeners right now. Just if you're being completely honest, right? How full is your own love tank? How much do you feel and know you're loved by the Heavenly Father? And if you're feeling like you're running on fumes or you need a pit stop, stop, man. Rest, Sabbath, right? Abide.
Yeah. Well, and so that's, the whole idea of the Sabbath, when I was in my crisis, I was struggling in a lot of ways, and I had, grown up honoring the Sabbath and taking it. And then when I moved here and did the business, it's like kind of, you work one Sunday, and then one Sunday becomes 2 Sundays, and then it's every Sunday, And I had a friend who said, "Are you still taking your Sabbath?" And I was like, "No, actually, I'm not. I stopped doing that." And he's like, "That's like the stake in the ground. That's the starting point to go, you know what? I'm going to hold off. I'm going to do a little less and trust God to do more." And it's like a domino effect that everything else starts to unfold from that moment in other parts of our life.
Yeah, absolutely. Every time, without exception, I look back on my life when I've slowed down and done less. That's when I've always experienced breakthrough and revelation, without a doubt.
Yeah. So let's talk about stories. You're the storytelling master, the guru of story. You've learned a few things at least, but they shape us. Narratives shape how we see the world and the creature. We just love to consume stories, whether it's movies or whatever, fiction, nonfiction. So what's a story? What are some stories that have shaped you, that have defined who you are and shaped the way that you see the world and inspired you and changed you?
Boy, that's a good one. Dances with Wolves is definitely a story that I keep coming back to. Braveheart, Karate Kid, Star Wars. I'm just a sucker for the hero's journey, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess at the end of the day, we're just not that complicated. It's complicated and miraculous as our brains are. Apparently, they're pretty formulaic a little bit. But I can definitely relate with the person that feels under-equipped, qualified to rise to the challenge. And I think we're all deep down are looking for that guide. And I think that's one of the beauties of the Christian walk. Right? What better guide than Jesus and the Good Shepherd?
Yeah.
to help us through that journey.
Yeah. Tell me more about the stories that you steward, that you collect, that you share.
Well, it's funny, like, and you know this as much as anybody, the 315 project, at the end of the day, the evidence is these stories, these narratives that
Hmm.
are collected. But the heart of the ministry is really just helping Christians slow down and sometimes for the first time recognize and realize that they do actually have a story
Hmm.
worth telling, that their story brings life, that their story brings restoration and healing, not just to themselves, but those that God would choose to hear it.
Yeah.
And so the more I do the ministry, it drifts further from the actual story art, the art of the story, and really more into almost like the spiritual counseling
Mm.
aspects of spiritually directing someone to get from the point where they're like, I don't have a story, no one wants to hear my story, I don't feel like telling my story, to what if we could walk with you and point you to Jesus and remind you of truths that would say, well, okay, I do have a story, but I still don't want
Yeah.
to tell
Yeah.
it. And then
So
what's that?
what's going on there? Why are people saying they either don't have one, or it's not worth sharing, or if it is worth sharing, they don't want to do it?
uh, it's a great question, and it comes down to fear or pride. Those one of those two
Mm.
things. And fear is easier to admit and acknowledge and see in yourself than pride is, because pride
Mm.
has false humility wrapped up in there, right?
Yeah.
Um, what I've what I've come to see is, there's a heart aspect to the ministry where I'm like, it's strictly heart, right? And then there's kind of an analytical,
Yeah.
psychological thing, and I take fear and pride and I turn it into, what is it that someone's trying to hold on to that they're afraid of losing,
Mm.
which would be the fear that's causing them not to want to share their story, and then what would someone perhaps be trying to prove to themselves or others that would keep them from telling their story, which would be pride.
Mm. And why is the pride so difficult to see in ourselves?
That's a great question. I think Andy Stanley preached on that several times. Um, it just comes into a lot of different insidious dimensions and flavors and degrees. Like I said, like the easiest one is pride versus false humility.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things, I'm a student of this. Like no one, I've had to learn everything through osmosis and
Yeah.
alchemy. So I did a Google search, like what's the difference between pride, humility, and false humility?
Mm.
And I found some matrices that were very, very eye-opening.
Mm.
Because eye-opening because, oh yes, I see these things in myself, I see these things in those that are closest to me that I know. And for anyone that's willing and courageous enough to kind of assess themselves into how much we how deeply imprisoned we are by our own pride, it's
Yeah.
not hard to find examples that you might, I never thought of that before, but
Yeah.
yes.
Well, it's interesting because I've been thinking, that the idea of pride and humility. I think we are in a situation where we are being humbled, and we can choose to sort of embrace that or not. But I recently rewatched. Speaking of stories, Avengers: Infinity War, and so Thanos comes and he just starts taking out the heroes one after the next, and they're pretty much helpless, and they're all, you kind of see that tension of dealing with one's pride and being humbled, not because you have chosen to, but because of somebody's more powerful than me. So it's been it's just an interesting dynamic that's unfolding right now.
Yeah, we watched that as well last week, and I think the word that I would use, having you said that, would be, it's interesting to see the hopelessness that was coming across these characters that
Yeah.
were very prideful and boastful, like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm better
Yeah.
than you, and they were yeah, hopelessness can make us feel small and humble, which is good in a lot of ways, if it's, for the purposes of, at the same time, it realizes and teaches how awesome and God is and how big
Yeah.
He is.
And I think you have to have that tether, because without it, despair seems like the only other option. Despair, or that there is a more powerful being than even I can imagine, and that being cares about me, I guess, versus believing it was apathetic or whatnot. So
Well, and despair is an interesting word too. I'm reading a lot on spirituality and psychology and stuff, and that they're pointing, like, it's in those times when we do really truly recognize our despair,
mm-hmm.
that is when God's going to be able to do His most
Yeah, yeah.
amazing work in us.
And for me, the beauty there is that, wow, I can be completely broken, go completely the wrong way, mess everything up, just fail across the board, and yet God still pursues me. He still loves me. Like, there's nowhere I couldn't go that I have to be afraid, because I know he's as the sheep and the shepherd, he's going to find me wherever I wander off to, no matter how bad the place is.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was picturing the lifeguard, right?
Uh-huh.
When we've reached the point of despair as swimmers, when we quit flailing about, and we're like, I'm done. That's at the moment that God can come in and save us,
Mm,
redeem us, restore us.
yeah, yeah. To let go, and that's the letting go, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's, I'd struggle with that too. That tension between striving and abiding.
Yeah.
Right. We are in such a time where it's almost like the harder you strive, the more you produce, the harder you work. It's like this badge of honor, like go out there and do your side hustle and,
Yeah.
be a solopreneur or whatever. But it's like the antithesis of what I want to be experiencing and being equipped to do, which is like, God, will you show me how to abide deeper and deeper and trust that you will produce the fruit, and that I'm
Hmm.
only to bear it.
And yeah, that he's the one that we trust for the outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else on stories? I mean, how do you think stories can help us through this situation we're in? Do you think it?
Boy, that's what I'm continuing to learn. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm reading, these little nuggets that it's, proven scientific fact that it is like the stories have the narrative of a story has some psychological,
Hmm.
physiological way of making it possible for our brains to put ourselves in
Yeah.
someone else's story. So that would be like, if there's
Almost.
one thing
Yeah.
I could just encourage anyone, it's like, if you're wondering what you could do to encourage someone else, you have no idea what could happen if you shared your story with someone else, and by asking someone else, like, what's your story? It's healing and restorative, both for the storyteller and the story listener.
Yeah.
And very rarely are we invited or encouraged by those that lead us to do that.
Mm. Yeah. It's interesting, because I think, I'm trying to, as an example, just a recent one. I think it was a few weeks ago. The White House press conference is Dr. Birx. She shared the story of, I think it was her mom or her grandmother, who was alive, was just a young child during the Spanish flu, and she brought home that to her mom, and her mom caught it and died, and she lived with that story for the rest of her life, and that burden, and her sharing that story, like, I could relate. That's like my kids. I've got 5 of them. Imagine if that was them. And it has a very visceral way of kind of connecting to it. I think of an X-Men. They have the danger room. They go into the simulation to kind of experience something, and then they learn and grow and train. And that's kind of, I think stories can kind of be that for us.
Well, as you were talking about Dr. Burke's story, and I was watching your face, like your body language as you talked about it, it's like, wow, like stories help us remind us that we're not alone.
Yeah.
And what that's power right there. That's power.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So what about systems? Systems are another way we live in systems. I think we sort of think that sort of somebody rules the world or somebody sort of controls everything in the sense that the president is responsible for every single thing that happens in our country. But we live in these complex systems that integrate and intersect. What do you think about systems, and how do you look at them? How do you use them? How do you participate in them?
Interesting question. I despise systems personally, and you know me enough to know why I might say that, but I despise them in the following way. They're like the life jacket that my uncle tells me I have to wear if I want to get on the boat, but I don't want to wear the life jacket. It's like, oh, this is uncomfortable. I hate this. It's hot. I'm sticky. Like, I just want to have fun.
But you must like the system of the motor that runs the boat, right?
Yeah, I appreciate
the system.
systems.
Yeah.
I respect systems. I know, especially, you're big on, like, systems bring clarity where there's chaos, right? But if I'm being completely honest, for whatever immature, broken reason, the sick part of my brain that thrives on chaos. I self-medicate on chaos.
Yeah.
It's
Is it a way to, is it to hide? Is it a hiding mechanism or something else?
It is. No, chaos for me is like the equivalent of going to a all-you-can-eat, high-carb, high-fat buffet. Right? Oh, this is comfortable. It all tastes good. I could eat a bunch of this and fall asleep happy.
Yeah.
Right? And systems is like, oh, we have this really nutritious, portion-controlled salad bar over there,
Yeah.
but there's some guy that's going to tell you precisely what to put on it, and you're not going to feel good in the short term. You're just going to want to keep looking over at the chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really just, and you know this, you know me a long time, it's just really my stubbornness and my immaturity to really be content in the chaos instead of leaning into the discomfort of getting the clarity through systems.
Well, I would say that systems can become tyrannical. And in those times, chaos is how you push back on the system, right? So I think it's a bit neutral in some senses, that it can be a good thing or a bad thing. A system inherently isn't necessarily one or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about the conductor, right? The symphony, you listen to Beethoven's Ninth or Mozart's Requiem, you're like, what a great example of systems harnessing what otherwise could just be mass chaos. And there's musicians in there that I'm sure are more wired like me, where they're more improvisational, they're more emotional feeling than thought analytical. But without that system, you're not going to get that art and that orchestration.
Yeah. So, but that's something that you can appreciate. So what is it that, when you describe that you rebel against?
That would be a longer I have to sit on several psychologists' couches and them tell you. But it's deep rooted. It's deep rooted in 40 years of being undiagnosed with not knowing that I had ADD, a lot of shame and guilt from not being able to stick with and follow systems.
So it almost sounds like you've been the victim of systems, in the sense that systems have been used to hurt you.
Yeah, I mean, without having an expert basis for saying it, like I think the traditional academic educational scoring and testing system was really, really wounding for my personality, my ADD type growing up, where I was constantly labeled and told that you're an underachieving, lazy person,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's kind of where I started rebelling against the systems.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I
Does that
start,
almost become like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way? Like it's like I'm going to prove you wrong by proving you right. I don't know.
no, it was more rebellious. I hear
Okay.
I heard a couple of TED Talks on this, like, you know, with the education system, but it was like, look, I'm not lazy because I excel in drama, I excel in music, I excel in sports. You know, I'm not an underachiever because I'm at the top percentile wise in
Yeah.
certain skills and attributes, but by your measures of success, by your
Mm.
measures of
Someone's
conformity.
putting their standard on you when it's not the appropriate one to put on you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
You
it's
know,
interesting. Yeah. Go ahead.
well, just, you know, the systems that say, you know, we're going to take all these kids, you know, from vastly different skill levels and things. We're going to each have them go through these 12 chapters and take these 3 quizzes and these two pop quizzes and this, you know, it's just without, I just want to stress, without properly diagnosing or making accommodations in 1984, right, for a guy with massive ADHD. They didn't know, you know, it's still widely contested. It drives me nuts. I'll see sometimes on Facebook somebody will say, you know, ADHD is just a label we're throwing on these kids. I can tell you, man, it
Mm.
is very, 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 very real. And I can tell you that if for those that are listening that are thinking that and they have kids that they suspect may have it, like, you're literally telling your kids to run faster around a track with a torn ACL. Like,
Mm.
you don't understand it unless you've had it, or,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
very, very dangerous.
Yeah. It's interesting the way you describe your conflict with systems. It makes me think of the Matrix films because he's essentially fighting the system, only to find out that he's just playing a part in this larger system, which is really an interesting, dimension to that.
Mm.
So life, it's hard, it's challenging, it can be unfair, but it's also moments of joy and prosperity. As we navigate the situation, how do we navigate life, our work? What are your final words of some final words of wisdom to guide and inspire us?
Hey, thanks for having me. This has been cathartic, enjoyable. I think my hope is that we would all take advantage of the moment by moment opportunities in every moment to just see the miracles and the nature of God, whether it be in the wind blowing through the trees or the breath in our lungs,
Yeah.
the sun rising, the smile on our kids' face, the tears on our kids' faces. This is a incredible opportunity for us to get reconnected to our Creator
Mm-hmm.
and to our brothers and sisters. And it's easy. I'll be the first one to say, man, it'd be so much easier to just pull the shades down and binge watch. But I don't want to look when this is all said and done. How did I steward this
Mm.
opportunity? Right. So
Yeah, it's interesting. The parable of the talents comes to mind, what we've been given and what we do with it. And some of us might think we've been dealt a really terrible hand, but perhaps that's our opportunity.
absolutely, hopefully we can all find someone who's a better person than we do. And I don't know, I think the wisdom would be, if be honest, let your heart, it's okay to be depressed, it's okay to be worn
Mm-hmm.
out, it's okay to be afraid, it's okay to be uncertain. These are all incredible opportunities to just be quiet and say, God, would you speak to my heart? Would
Yeah.
you know what I'm going through, and I invite you in to my life. And it's like, is that a salvation altar prayer? Well, maybe for some listener it is, but I think we all could benefit from just, every morning, right? God, I'm nothing without you. I need you.
Mm-hmm.
would you come in today and
Yeah.
give me strength?
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of the story of Job. You know, Job, goes through his whole journey, and then God shows up and he doesn't answer any of his questions. He just says, "Who do you think you are?" Essentially. And Job comes back and says, "I thought I knew you. Now I really do." And none of the questions I asked or none of the answers to those questions even matter, because you are what matter.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful moment in the story.
Mm. You are an inspiration to me and a lot of other folks, and I hope you know that. And I thank you for letting me share with you today.
Well, thank you. How can people connect with you? You're on LinkedIn. Obviously, I'll put a link to that. What else? What else is out there? What are you working on? What do you got going? What are the websites?
I put up a simple website at my name, toddmiechiels.com, and that's where you can find out, a little bit about me and the different projects and ministries that I'm working on and with.
Okay. And then how, I guess people, they can just follow you on LinkedIn and they can start to watch what you're doing with these videos.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook a lot. And
okay, Facebook, LinkedIn.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but like I'm off of Instagram. I'm not off, but I'm not using Instagram. I'm not using Twitter.
Okay.
And I don't know why. It's not like out of just like too much stuff.
You kind of have to pick. I tend to like Twitter the most, but I do post on Instagram. I just don't really ever look at the feed. But
I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
You're the perfect guy. So I look at I want to know, maybe this is for a different call, but I want to know what you think goes on in our hearts and our human psyche when we choose not to share someone else's content. Let me be more specific. We like somebody's content, but we don't share it. What's happening in the human heart?
Well, I may be the wrong person to ask that, because I'm a chronic sharer. So I'll share a link to a podcast, to a page, to a whatever link. So I'm sharing a lot, but a lot of it's the way what I would describe for myself is I find something that's valuable to me, and then I want to share it with somebody else. And that's like part of my love language, I guess, in a way, but it does take an extra step. So I'll give you a kind of a really small example that I started doing. Sometimes I'll be listening to my Pandora, and it cycles through songs, and sometimes it'll suggest ones. But anyways, I'll hear a song that either reminds me of someone or an experience that someone was in, and I have a moment, right? And I would just have that moment. But what I started to do is go, well, why don't I share this with that person? Like grab find a song on YouTube and then share it with that person. Hey, I was thinking about you when I heard the song today. And so it's something that takes a little bit extra effort. I found a way to kind of make it easy, but so that's one dynamic. I do know, practically speaking, when you share something, you're being vulnerable, because you don't know how they're going to respond or if they will. We don't know if it's, sometimes you can share something. I remember I shared something with a family member that I wanted to share, like, as a helpful thing to that person, and they were offended that I shared it with them. So you have the dynamic of the negative that can come with it. So it's like, well, it's not worth the risk. I just won't do it. There's also just in terms of content marketing, there's actually a trend. The length of an article, the longer it is, it has to kind of meet a threshold of, I don't know I think like an ideal length is like around 1,000 words or something. And after you get that length, and then you start to get longer, like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 words, then there's more investment in the thing. So it feels more worthwhile to share that thing. So if I read a Seth Godin post, it's like 4 sentences and it's really good, there's something psychologically that's like, well, it's so short. It's like, is it really worth sharing? So that's one kind of, those are several thoughts. I also think, I mean, that whole idea you mentioned earlier about giving what you have. Sometimes someone can only consume, there's not enough to consume and then pay it forward. And so that may be another dynamic as well. I don't know what comes to mind when I say all that rambling, all those ramblings.
No, that's good, man. It's I think the thing that has me looking at it, the lens I'm looking at through is like somebody shares a scripture verse on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
And you'll have this isn't mine. Like you have 232 people or something like it.
Yeah.
Right. But then there's like 2 shares, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, are all these people just raising their hand to be include? Oh yeah, I'm Christian. I'm
like a signal. What is it called? Virtue signaling.
Amen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But apparently not enough to go from this thumb like thing to this 2 centimeters over to a share.
Yeah.
And I think what it would be fascinating to me is the correlation between those folks that don't share that scripture that they liked and their disclosure of their faith within their LinkedIn channel or their LinkedIn profile. Right?
Yeah.
I want to say amen to that scripture, but I don't want to cross that line and share it so that my platform thinks that I am also.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine there's some of that kind of narcissistic tendencies in there. Virtue signaling. I think there might be a lot of it that's just practically, I don't know if lazy would be the right word, but it's just, or busy. It's an extra effort. Like you can hit like without like changing it. You're kind of just already moving.
Right.
But the share, you got to hit it. And then if you want to do a comment, you can add that. And then it goes in your, it's just a little bit harder. But I mean, I don't know. I think it's worthwhile to do that. And yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. Maybe there's some research out there that we could explore. So yeah.
Another day.
Anything else you want to share that we didn't get to or missed?
Anyone listening, man, I can't encourage you guys enough to lean into Jason's IDEMA. IDEMA is like gold. It's like wisdom. Check it out, man. I guarantee you there's someone in your life that will thank you for sharing the IDEMA paradigm with you.
Yeah, well, thank you. And perhaps a system could help people more effectively share things.
Yeah, I'll close with this. Chaos allows me to escape whether I'm afraid of failure or success, because either way I'm probably not going to I'll be doing. But clarity and systems will bring one of those two to manifestation, and that scares me.
Yeah. This is the risk, right? Interesting.
Yeah. Love you,
well,
man.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, bro. Thanks a lot.